The ship was quiet at 4 in the morning. Most of the crew was asleep, dreaming of home or distant stars. The lights in the hallways had dimmed to a soft blue glow, and the only sounds were the gentle hum of the engines and the distant beeping of machines. Lieutenant Commander Daniel Carter was not asleep. He sat at his small desk, reading reports about their next mission. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he did not notice. His mind was busy with numbers and charts and the thousand small details that kept a starship running. The knock on his door was so soft that he almost missed it. Daniel looked up from his work. Visitors at this hour were rare. Usually, it meant something had gone wrong somewhere on the ship. He stood up and walked to the door, pressing the button to open it. What he saw made him forget everything else. Elle stood in the doorway. She was one of the oldest and most respected species in the galaxy. Her people had built great cities when humans were still living in caves. They had traveled between stars when Earth was young. They were known for their calm nature, their wisdom, and their complete control over their emotions. But the woman standing before Daniel looked nothing like the composed diplomat he had known for the past year. Her violet skin was pale, almost gray. Her silver eyes, usually so steady and confident, were wide with fear. Her hands trembled as she held something small against her chest. Daniel said, his voice full of concern. "What happened? Are you hurt?" She did not answer right away. Instead, she looked down the empty hallway as if checking to make sure they were alone. Then she stepped inside his quarters without waiting for an invitation. The door closed behind her. "I need your help," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I do not know who else to ask." Daniel guided her to a chair. He had never seen her like this. In all the months they had worked together, through difficult negotiations and dangerous situations, Elle had always been the calm one. She was the one who kept her head when everyone else was losing theirs. Seeing her so frightened made his heart beat faster. "Tell me what is wrong," he said gently. "Whatever it is, we will figure it out together." Elle looked at him for a long moment. Then she held out the object she had been clutching to her chest. It was a medical scanner, small and silver, with a screen that glowed with soft light. "I ran the test 3 times, she said. "I thought the machine was broken, but the results are the same every time." Daniel took the scanner from her shaking hands. He looked at the screen, but the symbols were in script. He could not read them. "What does it say?" he asked. Elle closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there were tears forming at the corners. Daniel had not known that could cry. "Could I be expecting human?" she asked. "Is that even possible?" The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He stared at her, his mind struggling to understand what she was saying. Expecting. She meant pregnant. She was asking if she could be pregnant. With his child. His thoughts went back to 3 months ago. The night of the peace accords. The celebration that followed, when the entire ship had rejoiced at the end of a war that had lasted for decades. There had been music and laughter, and a bottle of wine from Earth that Daniel had been saving for a special occasion. He and Elle had talked for hours that night, about their homes, their dreams, their fears. Somewhere between the wine and the stars visible through the observation window, something had changed between them. A wall had come down. A connection had formed. What happened next had felt like the most natural thing in the world. 2 lonely souls finding comfort in each other, far from everything they had known. Daniel had assumed there would be no consequences. Their species were too different. Every scientist in the galaxy agreed that human and biology were not compatible. Every scientist had been wrong. "This cannot be happening," Daniel said, but even as he spoke, he knew it was. The fear in Elle's eyes was real. The readings on the scanner were real. Somewhere inside her, new life was growing. Life that was half human and half. Something that had never existed before. "I do not know what to do," Elle said. Her voice broke on the last word. "My people will not understand. They will see this as a mistake, a problem to be solved. They will want to study me, study the child. They will take it away. Daniel knelt down in front of her chair. He took her hands in his, feeling how cold they were, how much she was shaking. "No one is taking anyone anywhere," he said firmly. "I promise you that." "You do not understand," Elle said. "The Council has power beyond what humans can imagine. They control entire star systems. They have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. If they want something, they take it. No one has ever stopped them." Daniel looked into her silver eyes. He thought about everything he knew about their ancient ships, their advanced technology, their armies of soldiers trained since birth. By any measure, they were more powerful than humanity could ever hope to be. But Daniel had learned something in his years among the stars. Power was not everything. Sometimes, the biggest battles were won not by strength but by courage, by refusing to give up, by standing firm when everyone else told you to run. "I do not care how powerful they are," he said quietly. "You are not alone in this. Whatever happens next, we face it together." Elle stared at him. In her long life, she had met many humans. She had studied their history, their wars, their rise from a small planet to a presence across the galaxy. She had always thought of them as young and foolish, brave but reckless, kind but naive. But in this moment, looking at Daniel Carter, she understood something new. Humans were not foolish for believing they could fight impossible odds. They were extraordinary for it. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk everything for me, for a child you did not plan?" Daniel smiled, though his eyes were serious. "Because that is what humans do," he said. "We protect the people we care about, no matter what." Outside the window, stars drifted slowly past. The ship continued on its journey through the dark, and in a small room on Deck 7, two people from different worlds held hands and prepared to face the unknown together. Neither of them knew what the morning would bring, but both of them knew in that quiet moment that their lives had changed forever. The impossible had happened, and nothing would ever be the same again. By the next afternoon, the news had spread through the ship. Daniel did not know how. He and Elle had told only one person, the chief medical officer, Amy Brooks, but secrets on a starship were like water through a broken pipe. They found ways to escape no matter how hard you tried to contain them. Amy had run every test she could think of. She had scanned Elle from head to toe. She had compared the readings to every medical database in the ship's computer. And when she was finished, she had sat down heavily in her chair and stared at the results for a very long time. "This should not be possible," Amy said. She was a practical woman in her 40s, with short gray hair and steady hands that had performed surgery in the middle of battle. Nothing surprised her anymore, or so she had thought. "But it is happening," Daniel said. He stood beside Elle, who sat on the examination table in a thin medical gown. She looked small and fragile in the bright lights of the medical bay. Amy nodded slowly. "Yes, it is happening." She pulled up the scan results on a large screen so they could all see. "The fetus is approximately 12 weeks along. The genetic structure is unlike anything I have ever seen. Half of the DNA is clearly human, the other half is, and somehow the two are working together." "Working together?" Elle asked. Her voice was steadier now than it had been the night before, but Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders. "More than working together," Amy said. She zoomed in on a particular section of the scan. "The human DNA is not just compatible with your genetics, Elle. It is actively strengthening the developmental process. The fetus is healthier than any pregnancy I have on record, and I have access to data going back thousands of years." Daniel felt a strange mix of emotions, pride and fear and wonder all tangled together. His child was growing inside Elle. His child was not just surviving, it was thriving. "What does this mean?" he asked. Amy was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was careful. "I do not want to make promises I cannot keep, but from what I am seeing, this pregnancy has a very good chance of success. The baby could be born healthy, strong. For the first time since she had knocked on his door, Daniel saw hope flicker in Elle's silver eyes. But it faded quickly, replaced by worry. "My people," she said, "when they learn of this, they will come." She was right. The High Council learned of the pregnancy within 3 days. Daniel never found out who told them. Perhaps someone on the ship had sent a secret message. Perhaps they had spies that no one knew about. It did not matter. What mattered was the ship that appeared on their sensors 1 week later. It was massive, a command vessel 3 times the size of the horizon's edge. It hung in space like a great silver bird, beautiful and deadly. When it hailed them, the bridge went silent. Ambassador Rand appeared on the. He was old, even by standards. His violet skin had faded to a pale lavender, and his silver eyes were cold and hard. He had served the High Council for over 2,000 years. He had negotiated treaties with 100 species. He had never failed to get what he wanted. "Captain Grant," he said, his voice was smooth as silk, "I trust you know why I am here." Captain Laura Grant sat in her command chair, her back straight and her expression calm. She was a small woman with brown hair streaked with gray, but there was steel in her eyes. She had faced pirates and warlords and creatures from the dark between stars. She was not afraid of an old ambassador. "I can guess," Laura said, "but why do you not tell me anyway?" Rand's lips curved into something that was almost a smile. "We have learned that diplomatic L is carrying a child, a hybrid child. This is a matter of great importance to my people. She must return to Prime immediately for proper care and study." Laura did not react. "Study." "The child is unprecedented," Rand said. "We must understand how this happened, what it means, the potential implications for our species." "And what about Elle?" Laura asked. "Does she get a say in this?" The ambassador's expression flickered, just for a moment. Then it was smooth again. "Elle is a citizen of the collective. Her duty is to her people. Personal feelings cannot be allowed to interfere with matters of such importance." Laura leaned forward in her chair. "Ambassador, I am sure you know that Elle has requested asylum aboard this vessel. Under galactic law, she has the right to remain here until her request is processed." "Galactic law," Rand said slowly. He made the words sound like a joke. "The rote half of those laws, we can rewrite them whenever we choose." "Perhaps," Laura said, "but you have not done so yet. Until you do, Elle stays here." The ambassador stared at her. In 2,000 years, very few beings had spoken to him this way. Humans were supposed to be afraid of the. They were supposed to know their place. This small woman in her battered starship should have been begging for his favor. Instead, she was telling him no. "You are making a mistake," Rand said. "The collective does not forget those who stand in our way." Laura smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "Neither do we." The went dark. On the bridge, no one spoke. Daniel stood near the back, his hands clenched at his sides. He had watched the entire exchange in silence, his heart pounding. Now he stepped forward. "Captain," he said, "thank you." Laura turned to look at him. Her expression softened just a little. "Do not thank me yet, Commander. We just made some very powerful enemies." She paused. "But Elle is one of us now, and we do not give up our own." Those words spread through the ship even faster than the news of the pregnancy. Within hours, everything changed. Crew members who had barely known Elle before now stopped her in the hallways to offer their support. The cook started researching dietary needs. The engineers began modifying a section of the medical bay into a proper birthing suite. Daniel watched it all with amazement. He had served on human ships for years. He knew his people were loyal, but he had never seen anything quite like this. An entire crew coming together to protect a woman who was not even human. When he told Elle about it that night, she did not understand. "Why?" she asked. They were sitting together in his quarters, her head resting against his shoulder. "I have done nothing to earn their loyalty. I am a stranger to most of them." Daniel thought about how to explain. It was difficult to put into words something that humans simply felt. "Because that is who we are," he said finally. "We are not the oldest species. We are not the strongest. We do not have the best technology or the most resources, but we have each other. When one of us is in trouble, the rest of us stand together. It does not matter if you are human or anything else. If you are part of the family, we protect you." Elle was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was very soft. "I have lived for 300 years, she said. "I have seen many things, but I have never experienced anything like this. My own people would hand me over without a second thought. Your people, who barely know me, are willing to risk war." Daniel pulled her closer. Outside the window, the command ship still waited in the darkness. "Let them come," he said. "They will learn what it means to fight humanity." And somewhere deep in the ship, a baby who was half of two worlds continued to grow, unaware of the storm gathering around her. The standoff lasted for 3 weeks. The command ship followed the horizon's edge wherever it went. It stayed just far enough away to avoid being considered a direct threat, but close enough that everyone on board knew it was there, watching, waiting. Ambassador Rand sent messages every day. At first, they were polite requests. Then they became demands. Then they became thinly veiled threats. Captain Laura Grant answered each one with the same calm refusal. "Elle has requested asylum. Her request is being processed. Until a decision is made, she remains under our protection." The ambassador grew more frustrated with each response. He was not used to being. In his long life, he had negotiated with emperors and presidents and beings of immense power. None of them had been as stubborn as this one human captain. What he did not understand, what he could not understand, was that Laura Grant was not being stubborn for political reasons. She was not playing some complex game. She simply refused to give up someone who had asked for her help. It was that simple. During those 3 weeks, life on the horizon's edge continued. Crew members went about their duties. The engines hummed. The lights flickered on and off according to the ship's day and night cycle. But underneath the routine, something had changed. Elle noticed it first. She had spent most of her time confined to Daniel's quarters or the medical bay, afraid to show her face. But Amy insisted that she needed exercise for the health of the baby. So one afternoon, she gathered her courage and walked through the ship. What she found surprised her. Instead of suspicious looks and whispered conversations, she received smiles and waves. Crew members she had never spoken to stopped to ask how she was feeling. A young engineer named Moore showed her the special medical suite he was building for her baby. A navigation officer named Watson gave her a star chart marked with safe routes away from space. In the mess hall, the old cook, a man named Sam, insisted on preparing a special meal for her. "I spent all week learning about food," he said proudly, setting a plate in front of her. "No meat, no dairy, nothing too spicy, and extra minerals for the little one." Elle stared at the food. It was not quite right. The colors were off and the texture was strange. But Sam had clearly put hours of work into it. He stood beside her table, waiting anxiously for her reaction. She took a bite. It was not good. It was, in fact, one of the worst things she had ever tasted, but she smiled anyway. "It is wonderful," she said. "Thank you." Sam's face lit up like a child's on a birthday. "You really like it. I was so worried. I will make it again tomorrow." When Daniel found her later that evening, she was sitting in the observation deck, staring at the stars. There were tears on her cheeks, but she was smiling. "What is wrong?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "Nothing is wrong," she said. "That is what confuses me." She turned to look at him. "I ate the most terrible meal of my life today, and I have never been so happy." Daniel laughed softly. "Sam's cooking takes some getting used to." "It is not the food," Elle said. "It is everything. Your people have known me for barely a year. I am not human. I am not even from the same part of the galaxy. But they treat me like I belong, like I matter." She paused, struggling to find the right words. Among my people, belonging must be earned. It takes centuries to build relationships. Trust comes slowly if it comes at all, but you humans offer it freely, without condition, without hesitation. Daniel took her hand. We are not perfect. We can be selfish and cruel and petty. We fight among ourselves. We make terrible mistakes. But when it matters, when someone needs help, we come together. It is the best thing about us. It is remarkable, Elle said softly. My people have forgotten how to do this. We have lived so long that we have forgotten how to connect. We are powerful and wise and ancient, but we are also lonely. So very lonely. She placed her free hand on her stomach, where their child continued to grow. This baby, she said, she will be something new, not human, something else entirely. Perhaps she will have the best of both of us. Daniel leaned over and kissed her forehead. She will be loved. That is the most important thing. 2 days later, Ambassador Rand finally lost his patience. The ultimatum came at midnight. Every screen on the ship flickered to life, showing the ambassador's cold face. You have 48 hours, he announced. Return Elle to custody or we will take her by force. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. You have been warned. The screen went dark. Captain Grant called an emergency meeting in the main conference room. Every senior officer attended. Daniel stood at the back, his heart heavy. He knew what was coming. He knew what he had to do. We cannot fight them, said the chief of security, a tall man named Cole. That ship has weapons that could destroy us in seconds. If they attack, we will not survive. Then we run, said Watson. I have calculated a course through the asteroid belt near the system. It is dangerous, but our ship is smaller and more maneuverable. We might be able to lose them. We might, said doubtfully, or we might crash into a rock and die. The argument went back and forth. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to flee. Some thought they should contact Earth and ask for backup. No one could agree on anything. Finally, Daniel stepped forward. There is another option, he said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. I could surrender myself, he said. I am the father. Maybe if I offer to go with them, they will leave Elle and the baby alone. The room went silent. Laura Grant stared at him for a long moment. No, she said. Captain, if it saves the ship and the baby, then it is worth it. I said no. Laura stood up from her chair. Her voice was firm, but there was something else in it too, something that sounded almost like anger. We do not trade one of our own for another. That is not who we are. That is not what this crew stands for. She looked around the room at her officers. We are going to find another way, she said. I do not care how long it takes or how hard it is. We will find a solution that does not involve giving anyone up. That is an order. There were no more arguments after that. The crew worked through the night, trying to find a way out. Engineers looked for weaknesses in the ship. Communications officers sent secret messages to allies who might help. Scientists analyzed every piece of data they had about technology. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, Elle sat alone in the observation deck, watching the distant lights of the ship that wanted to take her away. She thought about everything that had happened, the fear, the uncertainty, the overwhelming kindness of strangers who had no reason to care about her. For the first time in her very long life, she understood what it meant to have hope. The humans would find a way, she was sure of it now. Because that was what humans did. They found ways. The baby came too early. It happened on the 39th day of the standoff. The ship still hung in space behind them, waiting for the deadline that had been extended again and again as negotiations continued. Captain Grant had managed to stall long enough for backup to arrive. 3 human warships now floated between the horizon's edge and the vessel. The situation was tense but stable. Then Elle collapsed in the middle of the mess hall. Daniel was on the bridge when he got the call. He ran through the corridors faster than he had ever run before, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. By the time he reached the medical bay, Amy was already there, shouting orders to her team. "What is happening?" Daniel demanded. He pushed through the crowd of nurses and grabbed Amy's arm. "Is she okay? Is the baby okay?" Amy did not look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the screens showing Elle's vital signs. "The baby is coming, now, 6 weeks early." 6 weeks, Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. "But you said she needed more time. You said the lungs were not ready." "I know what I said." Amy finally turned to face him. Her expression was grim. "But Bobbies do not always listen to doctors. We need to get her into surgery now." They moved Elle to the special birthing suite that had built. It was not finished. Some of the equipment was still in boxes, but it was the best they had. Daniel held Elle's hand as they prepared her for surgery. Her skin was colder than usual, almost ice-like, and her silver eyes were unfocused. She kept trying to speak, but the words came out broken and confused. "Daniel," she whispered, "the baby, save the baby." "We are going to save both of you," he said. His voice shook despite his best efforts to stay calm. "I promise, I promise." The next 3 hours were the longest of Daniel's life. He stood outside the surgery room watching through the window. Inside, Amy and her team worked with desperate speed. Elle's body kept shifting between states as if it could not decide whether to follow human or patterns. Her temperature dropped, then spiked. Her heart rate fluctuated wildly. The baby's readings were equally chaotic. "Her body does not know what to do," Amy said through the intercom. "Births are completely different from human ones. The baby is trying to come out the human way, but Elle's physiology is fighting it. We need to adapt." "Adapt how?" Daniel asked. There was a pause. Then Amy said something that would stay with Daniel for the rest of his life. "We are going to have to invent a new procedure, right now, in the middle of surgery." It was impossible. It was insane. No medical team in history had ever done something like this. But Amy Brooks was not just any doctor, she was human. And humans, when pushed to their limits, found ways to do the impossible. She started barking orders to her team. They combined surgical techniques with human ones. They modified equipment on the fly. When one approach failed, they tried another. When that failed too, they tried something completely new. Crew members gathered in the hallway outside the medical bay. Word had spread through the ship and no one could sleep. Captain Grant stood among them, still in her uniform, her face pale with worry. The engineer was there too, praying to gods he did not believe in. Old Sam had brought food, even though no one was hungry. They waited together. At 3:47 hours, a new sound echoed through the ship. It was a cry, high and thin and impossibly loud, the cry of a baby taking her first breath. Daniel's knees went weak. He grabbed the wall for support, tears streaming down his face. Through the window, he saw Amy holding a tiny figure wrapped in a white blanket. The baby was small, so small, with skin that shimmered violet in the bright lights. But her lungs were strong, so very strong. Amy brought her to the window so Daniel could see. The baby had silver eyes like her mother, but there was something else in those eyes too, something stubborn and fierce, something human. "She is healthy," Amy said. Her voice was thick with exhaustion and emotion. "Against all odds, she is perfectly healthy." "And Elle?" Daniel asked. He was almost afraid to hear the answer. "Stable. It was close, but she is going to be fine." The crowd in the hallway exploded into cheers. People hugged each other, laughing and crying at the same time. Someone started singing an old Earth song about miracles and new beginnings. Daniel barely heard any of it. He could only stare at his daughter, this impossible child, this bridge between two worlds. She was so small, so fragile, and yet she had already survived something that should have killed her. She was a fighter, just like her parents. An hour later, when Elle had woken up and the baby had been properly examined, they finally let Daniel into the room. He walked slowly, almost reverently, toward the bed where his family waited. Elle looked exhausted but happy. She held the baby in her arms, marveling at every tiny detail: 10 fingers, 10 toes, a small nose that wrinkled when she yawned. "She looks like you," Elle said softly. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed. He reached out and touched his daughter's cheek. It was softer than anything he had ever felt. "She has your eyes," he said. They stayed like that for a long time, just the three of them, surrounded by the quiet beeping of machines and the distant hum of the ship. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance. The ship still waited in the darkness. The future was still uncertain. But in that moment, none of it mattered. There was a knock on the door. Daniel looked up to see Ambassador Rand standing in the doorway. He had come aboard the Horizon's Edge for the first time, without guards or ceremony. His ancient face was unreadable. Daniel stood up immediately, placing himself between the ambassador and the bed. He was ready to fight if necessary, ready to die. But Rand did not attack. He simply stood there staring at the baby. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then slowly, the ambassador did something that no had ever done to a human. He bowed. It was a deep bow, the kind reserved for kings and prophets. His ancient head dipped low, his silver hair catching the light. "You have given us a future," he said quietly. "They have been dying for 1,000 years. Our birth rates fall. Our children grow fewer. We knew our end was coming, even if we refused to admit it." He raised his head, and for the first time there was something like emotion in his cold eyes. "But this child changes everything. She carries the seeds of renewal. She is hope made flesh." He looked at Daniel with something that might have been respect. "We treated you as enemies. We threatened you. We tried to take by force what should have been asked for with humility, and yet you offered kindness anyway." He paused. "We did not deserve it, but you gave it freely. That is what makes your people remarkable." Daniel did not know what to say. After weeks of fear and anger, this sudden change was hard to process. It was Elle who spoke. "Her name is," she said softly. "It means light, light in the darkness." The ambassador nodded slowly. "A fitting name, for she has brought light to us all." He bowed once more, then turned and walked away. His footsteps echoed down the empty corridor until they faded into silence. Daniel watched him go. Then he turned back to his family and smiled. The storm was over. A new dawn was beginning. 1 year later, the Horizon's Edge returned to Earth. Daniel stood on the observation deck, holding in his arms. She had grown so much in the past 12 months. Her violet skin had deepened to a rich purple, and her silver eyes sparkled with curiosity as she watched the blue-green planet grow larger in the viewport. She could not understand what she was seeing, but she reached toward it anyway, her tiny fingers stretching toward the light. "That is Earth," Daniel told her softly. "That is where your father comes from. That is home." Elle stood beside them, her arm wrapped around Daniel's waist. She too watched the planet approach, but her thoughts were different. For her, Earth was not home. It was something stranger and more wonderful. It was the birthplace of a species that had changed everything. "It is beautiful," she said. "Wait until you see the oceans," Daniel replied with a smile. "And the mountains and the cities. There is so much to show you." A lot had changed since birth. The High Council had issued a formal apology for their initial demands. Ambassador Rand himself had delivered it, speaking before the entire Galactic Assembly. He admitted that his people had acted out of fear and arrogance. He praised the humans for their courage and compassion. He promised that they would change. And they had. Research partnerships bloomed between human and scientists. No longer focused on taking or controlling, these new programs sought to understand and collaborate. Human biologists worked alongside geneticists, studying not just but the entire concept of hybrid vigor. What they discovered amazed everyone. Human DNA, it turned out, was special. Not because humans were stronger or smarter or more advanced than other species. They were not. By most measures, humanity was ordinary. Their technology was average. They were short. Their history was full of wars and mistakes and terrible crimes. But their genetics carried something unique: adaptability. Human DNA could bond with almost any other species in the galaxy. It could create bridges where none had existed before. It could take what was weak and make it strong. It could take what was dying and give it new life. The galaxy had overlooked humans for centuries. They had seen a young species, barely out of its cradle, stumbling among the stars. They had dismissed them as unimportant. They had been wrong. Was proof of that. Other children followed. Within a year of her birth, 3 more human pregnancies were announced. Each one was healthy. Each one carried the same hybrid vigor. The who had been slowly fatting for 1,000 years suddenly had a future again. And it was not just the other species began to take notice. A warrior race that had been at war with humanity just 2 years before requested a cultural exchange program. The ancient beings who communicated through music sent their first ambassador to Earth. Even the mysterious void walkers, who had not spoken to any other species in 10,000 years, sent a simple message: "We are watching. We are interested." Humanity was no longer a minor player. They were becoming something else entirely: a catalyst, a bridge, a species that connected others in ways no one had imagined possible. The horizon's edge landed at the main spaceport outside New York City. Crowds had gathered to welcome them. News drones floated overhead, broadcasting the arrival to billions of people across the planet. Security teams had to create a corridor just so the crew could disembark. Daniel's family was waiting at the edge of the crowd. His mother, a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. His brother, Jack, tall and broad-shouldered, waving a hand-painted sign that said "Welcome Home." And his nieces and nephews, jumping up and down with excitement. When saw for the first time, she burst into tears. "She is beautiful," she whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's violet cheek. "She is absolutely beautiful." Looked up at her grandmother with curious silver eyes. Then she smiled. It was a wide, toothless grin that lit up her entire face. Laughed through her tears. "Oh, she has your smile, Daniel, the same smile you had when you were a baby." Elle watched the reunion with a full heart. She had been nervous about meeting Daniel's family. She had worried that they would reject her, that they would see her as an outsider, an alien, something other, but had wrapped her in a hug before she could even finish introducing herself. "Thank you," had whispered in her ear. "Thank you for making my son so happy." That evening, they gathered at the family home for dinner. It was a small house in a quiet neighborhood, filled with old photographs and comfortable furniture. The walls were covered with memories: Daniel's graduation pictures, Jack's wedding, the children's first steps and birthday parties. Now there would be new memories. After dinner, when the children had gone to sleep and the adults were sitting in the living room with cups of tea, asked Elle to tell her story. So she did. She told them about the night she had knocked on Daniel's door, about the fear and confusion, about the kindness of the crew who had protected her. She told them about the standoff, the birth, the moment when Ambassador Rand had bowed. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Jack spoke. He had been quiet all evening, listening more than talking. Now he looked at Elle with something like awe in his eyes. "You crossed the galaxy," he said slowly. "You left your own people behind. You risked everything for a chance at a new life." He shook his head. "That takes more courage than I will ever have." Elle smiled. "I did not do it alone. Your brother was with me every step of the way, and his crew, and his captain. Without them, I would have given up long ago." "That is what humans do," said softly. She reached out and took Elle's hand. "We stand together, no matter what." Later that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Daniel and Elle sat together in the backyard. The stars were different here than they were in space. Dimmer, filtered through atmosphere and light pollution, but they were still beautiful. Slept peacefully in Elle's arms, exhausted from her first day on Earth. "I asked you a question once," Elle said quietly. "The night I came to your door, do you remember?" Daniel nodded. Could I be expecting human? I did not understand then what I was really asking. She looked down at this tiny miracle they had created together. I was not just asking about the baby. I was asking if there was hope, if there was a future, if someone like me could ever belong somewhere. She looked up at the stars, the same stars she had traveled through to get here. "You showed me there always is," she said. "You showed me that hope is not something you find. It is something you create, with courage, with love, with the simple decision to keep going even when everything seems impossible." Daniel put his arm around her shoulders. He thought about everything they had been through, the fear, the uncertainty, the moments when he had thought all was lost, and then he thought about what had gotten them through. It was not technology or weapons or political power. It was something simpler and more powerful than any of those things. It was love and loyalty and the refusal to give up on each other. "Humans are not special because of what we can do," he said. "We are special because of how we feel. We love fiercely. We protect endlessly. We hope even when hope seems foolish. That is our gift to the galaxy." Elle leaned her head against his shoulder. "It is a good gift," she said. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance. Somewhere out there, they were building a new future. Other species were reaching out, curious about the young race that had changed everything. And on a small planet called Earth, a family that should never have existed sat together in the darkness, dreaming of tomorrow. The morning that changed everything had been just the beginning. The best was yet to come.